Well, my friends, this has been a very unusual week. I feel like I've needed to say that a few times lately. Certainly no lack of action this week, but not necessarily the action that we wanted. Yikes, what happened here? We've got breaking fresh views to dive into just from today and plenty of stuff to cover across all things space. So let's get started.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and it has been, let's say, another exciting and frustrating week at Starbase. SpaceX were, of course, pushing rapidly towards Starship Flight 10 featuring Booster 16 and Ship 36. Well, maybe pushing a little too forceful as it turns out. Let's just rewind here because there is a lot to unpack. Action kicked off with the ship test stand being moved into the ring yard, continuing a while later into Mega Bay 2. This was all in order to kick off testing of Ship 36. It was lifted off its workstation and through a small gap we could see it being lowered into the testing stand. Indeed, we were off for static fire testing and it was soon rolling towards Massey's. Shaun was out on site watching it pass by, and you've got to love the perspective. The scale of these monsters is always amazing. A human there for scale always makes you look at these in a different kind of way. Thanks so much to all you incredible subscribers and supporters on Patreon, X and YouTube. We get to be on site watching all this play out, so we are very grateful every week that we get to do this. It's all because of you. Now zooming in, the detail is just wonderful. As you may have already noticed, this ship had a lot more of the white lines between all of the tiles. That's because SpaceX are still evolving the heat shield, and with every re-entry they are learning more about what works and what doesn't. Re-entry plasma entering some of the gaps between the tiles may well have been a problem, given that each tile isn't always perfectly flush with the rest. Just like with other newer starships, a lot of the tiles have that white blanketing already attached, and the excess on the sides is folded up to fill in those gaps. Of course, there were still some areas of Ship 36 where the tiles hadn't been installed, but finishing touches can always be applied right before a flight. Now remember, this had already done its cryogenic proofing campaign back in April, so we were about to see some Raptors firing up on it for the very first time. It was covered there in a light layer of dust, presumably from the Giga Bay construction, as SpaceX had left the door open there for quite some time last week. Anyway, it arrived at Massey's in the afternoon and it was placed over the flame trench. The next morning, its aft flaps had already opened as the tank farm started to prepare for loading the beast. Frost was soon creeping up there and the whole process seemed quite smooth. As we've now come to expect during propellant loading, they tested out all 4 flaps. Interestingly, loading actually ended quite early, so we were left wondering if this was indeed not a big 6-engine static fire after all. Well, we were right about that. Yes, SpaceX had kicked off with a short single-engine static fire to demonstrate the in-space burn. Remember, they planned to do this after the deployment of dummy Starlink satellites. It's just that, well, we haven't got to see them do that in the last few missions. It is worth mentioning that this camera angle was from the inside of the engine bay. Normally, we see angles from cameras outside looking up, so this is the first time that we've seen this view from the flame trench. Very cool. With that single-engine static fire out of the way, Ship 36 was detanked and it was time to prepare for the next bigger test. 2 days later, we were back at it again, this time during the night as propellant was being loaded into the ship. As usual, the liquid oxygen tank was filled almost fully with just a little in the methane tank. Flap testing again there, so we were really close to the static fire and, well, sadly, this was the closest thing to a launch that Ship 36 was going to get. Yeah, so that just happened. This shows how important it is loading as little methane as needed into the vehicle. You could just imagine if this was fully fueled. Big shout out to Starship Gazer who captured this in an absolutely spectacular way. Absolute destruction now recorded in the history of the Starship program. NSF had slow motion footage rolling, and if we look super carefully you can see that the vehicle first starts being torn apart between the nose cone and the payload bay barrel. Elon posted early the next morning saying that the data suggested a nitrogen composite overwrapped pressure vessel, or COPV, inside the payload bay failed below its proof pressure. If so, that would be the first time ever for this design, so I suspect these are going to go through a lot of new scrutiny. We suspect this failure then damaged the header tank lines, essentially unzipping the vehicle rapidly downwards. In this Starship flight shot, we can see one of those COPVs taking up a bunch of the camera view on the right in the payload bay, and these things hold thousands of pounds per square inch of pressure, so if they rupture, they do so big time. The payload bay was soon being ripped from the methane tank, and we can see the opaque gases roaring out at tremendous force. Of course, the, let's say, energetic event soon ruptured the methane tank, and yeah, the rest is history. You can even see the payload bay door flying here. Anyway, the fire continued for quite some time, and luckily it ended up contained. At one point when I was watching it, I thought they may end up with the methane storage tanks on site rupturing as well, but thank goodness that didn't happen. All the same, with an explosion of this size, there was certainly going to be damage on site. SpaceX, of course, had quickly put out a statement sharing the major anomaly. As they said, a safety clear area around the site was maintained throughout the operation and all personnel were safe and accounted for. With everything saved, it wasn't long before we got some aerial views of the aftermath from our friends at Interstellar Gateway, and yeah, that is about what we had feared watching it from ground level. The ship quick disconnect gantry toppled over and landed on top of the dance floor for the static fire testing stand. Not just that, but all of the lines leading towards the methane tank farm have been completely obliterated. Also, yes, you are seeing that right. That there is the remains of the middle area of the Starship Common Dome, and we can see part of the downcomer that feeds into the 3 gimbaling engines bent out of shape below. Along with that, part of the downcomer from the methane tank is also sticking out. Now, what is this close by? That would be part of a Raptor vacuum engine. That's part of the nozzle for Raptor Vacuum 524 to be specific, which we saw move into Megabay 2 a month ago. Now, the methane tank farm itself has taken a huge beating. Some of the explosive damage must have ruptured a few of the methane lines here because the vaporizers have been absolutely destroyed. One has almost completely melted, with the other 3 heavily damaged. Likewise, the carnage continued with these vertical tanks. At the time of the flyover, there were still several fires happening at Massey's, including this one here at one of the methane pumps. Certainly safe to say that a lot of the methane tank farm will be completely scrapped. Thankfully, they do already have a replacement on site for the liquid methane storage. Looking back at the flame trench itself, it appears that a lot of the other parts of Ship 36's aft section are now inside there, including what looks to be the thrust puck where the 3 center engines are mounted. Well, were mounted. Thankfully, the water deluge tank farm looks to be in a somewhat better shape, but even then, this smaller tank got knocked over on one side. Several of the big tanks got scorched there too, but hopefully just superficial stuff that will buff right out. Keep in mind that SpaceX is incredibly skilled at quickly transforming bleak-looking scenes like this into an operational site once more. Make sure that you're subscribed to the stuff that Interstellar Gateway is covering. I've got that linked in the description for you. So yes, this does bring us to the fairly hot topic of what might happen for Flight 10. Will they investigate the issue and apply any fixes needed on Ship 37 so that it can launch with the flight-ready booster of 16 in Flight 10? It may simply depend on the damage at Massey's. If, as an example, it is going to take months of repair before they can get the next Block 2 ship out for a static fire, perhaps SpaceX would be more inclined to move straight towards the next generation vehicles. Time will tell, but one thing's for sure, there is never a dull moment with SpaceX. I'm sure it will all be okay and we'll be back again watching another flight in no time. Every time that they've had a mishap, they are back in action well before anyone would have believed possible. So anyway, what about its originally intended partner booster 16? Well, we caught movement in Megabay 1. Here was a hot staging ring that most likely belongs to this booster moving out of the Star Factory and into the bay. Interestingly, it came back out, returning around 40 minutes later. During that move though, we saw that again some of the vents on the side are blocked off, so SpaceX will certainly be repeating the same assisted flip maneuver like we saw on Flight 9. That said, with that next flight obviously delayed, there is no need to have the hot staging ring remain stacked on the booster now, so it has already been moved back into the Star Factory. Heading over to the new Pad 2, the 4th and the last manifold had progressed far enough, and after being rigged up, it was ready to be lifted onto the new launch mount. Before jumping into that though, a big thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring today's video. If you've ever googled your name and found your old address or phone numbers staring back at you, yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, there are hundreds of shady data broker sites collecting your personal details, email addresses, phone numbers, birth date, home and business locations, even info about your relatives. They then sell it to advertisers and who knows what other parties without your consent. It's unsettling how much of you is out there, and armed with all that information, nefarious scammers can use that for identity theft or trying to take advantage of you via email and text scams. That's where Delete Me comes in. I've been using this service for a while now, and they've made it so much easier to reclaim a chunk of privacy online. They scan through the most common corners of the web to find where your information is listed and get it taken down in loads of areas. They don't just do this once either. Delete Me continues to monitor and remove new threats as they pop up. It's like a cleanup crew for your digital footprint. Now yes, you could try to tackle this manually, but with the sheer number of sites and loopholes, it's exhausting and slow. Delete Me automates it all for you, and now you can extend that protection to your entire family too. Each family member can even have their own login and privacy settings too if they wish, yet it's all administered under one account. It's a great way to reduce the risks of identity theft and scams across the board, so give it a try using my link joindeleteme.com/Marcus for a 20% discount on US consumer plans. You can also find the URL in the description for international plans too. Thank you, Delete Me. So back to SpaceX's new Pad 2, the fourth manifold is interesting. If you look carefully here, you can see this part protruding out from the bottom. This here is the supply line for the water to cool down the launch mount deck. Now, this was likely an initial fit check as it was soon lifted back off. Once night had fallen though, it was moved back on again, but this time to stay. The next pieces to that puzzle have also arrived on site, and they would be these two pipes. These, we suspect, will be connected to that latest manifold installed and would be the above ground part of the pipe that connects to the plumbing that heads back to the water tank farm. This should feed the entire water-cooled pancake at the top of the launch mount. Now heading back to the build site, the Gigabay, or rather its foundation, is now getting started. Once all of the sheet piles were finished, the team has since added geotextile, which is used in this case to help with water management. That was soon covered up with a layer of soil, all ready for the next step. 2 pile drilling machines have been brought on site to drill all the necessary piles for the Gigabay. Very exciting to see this, and we still have a fairly unobstructed view inside Megabay 2, where we could see Ship 38 sitting on the centre stand. Its slightly older sibling, Ship 37, was right here, which, until the loss of Ship 36, had been expected to launch on Flight 11. This has recently completed its cryogenic testing campaign, but again, maybe this is now destined for Flight 10 instead. That was lifted from the front left processing stand and moved over to the back left. Yes, it seems like it is now time for engine installation to take place on this vehicle, as the next day a Raptor vacuum engine moved into the bay, most likely destined for Ship 37. We haven't seen much action this week on the next generation booster, but we suspect this is because they were still super busy putting Test Tank 17 through its testing campaign. That test article is being used, we believe, to verify the new booster's aft design, including of course the internal header tank and downcomer, all quite different to the current generation flying. So yeah, it is continuing with its testing, and it's been hooked up even further to the testing rig. They've now installed these metal rods that will allow them to pull down via the cap on top. This would be so that they can stress test it using similar forces that the outer barrel would take during flight. Given the state of Massey's right now, we're not sure how quickly they will be back in action to finish these tests off. So yeah, it's a longer road than many of us thought, trying to nail reusability for the methane oxygen powered vehicles. Not only do we have SpaceX with Starship trying to do that, New Glenn is obviously trying to achieve this as well, closely followed by Rocket Lab's Neutron, with systems over at Wallops being activated as we speak. We even have Europe's first reusable full-scale demonstrator ready. ESA was here posting that after its fit check, Themis integration was completed and it is now packed and prepared for shipping. Themis is what they've named this demonstrator in order to finally get into low-cost rocket recovery and reuse. It's powered by the reusable methane-fueled engine Prometheus. It's designed to launch and land vertically similar to Falcon 9, and we've even seen images inside the tank there. The first flight will be a small hop where the engine will fire continuously but at varying thrust levels. In fact, it will apparently be the first use of cryogenic propulsion in such a test for Europe, and they want to fly it up to 100 meters on its first test flight. Hopefully we'll be seeing this launching in the near future, but currently there is no great estimate of when. We have Starlink action as always and some really nice views in this lot. The Group 15-9 mission was off on Monday evening with a batch of 26 satellites on board. Nice shot of them there. SpaceX shared this super long exposure shot from the ground with the clear California skies. Of course, given the time of day of the launch, another perfect opportunity to capture a space jellyfish, and indeed, that was spectacular. Shout out to David picking up these scenes. That is quite the view right there. It was the drone ship of course I Still Love You down in the darkness awaiting the fiery arrival of Booster 1093, and that was landing number 3 for that one. We even got to see the ascent plume in the background. If you look carefully there, right after the upper stage engines cut off, you can see that quite nicely with that neat twilight effect. Next up, a little over a day later in the early hours of Wednesday morning, we had Group 1018 off from Space Launch Complex 40. I've got to say, I am loving the new G-force readout there throughout the flights. Notice just after clearing the tower, Falcon 9 is only really accelerating upwards with an extra half G. They keep this quite limited right up until they're about to punch through max Q and then watch it accelerate. By the time they hit main engine cutoff, it is pulling a total of 3.8. This was another young booster, number 1090, on its 5th flight here, and a batch of 28 satellites in the stack. Sadly, there was no shot of them this time. Just Read the Instructions was taking the catch for this one, and that, believe it or not, was it for Starlink missions for the week. Now, Axiom Space's crewed launch was back in the schedule again after the issues found last week. If you caught my video a week ago, you will recall that it had been pushed for a few reasons. First, a liquid oxygen leak had been found in the Falcon 9, which had pushed the mission back by a day or so, but then that was followed by a new issue. Not from SpaceX, but the International Space Station. Indeed, there was a detection of another leak there too, as discovered by the cosmonauts on board. This new pressure signature in the Sphetus service module was now being analysed, and just to be on the safe side, they wanted a little more time to check it out. NASA's June 14th update shared how they were going about testing this, but after the investigation, they seemed happy enough for the Axiom 4 mission to be placed back into the launch schedule for late this week. Of course, later in the week that got bumped just a little further, so we're trying to be patient with this one. Axiom posted that the crew remains in quarantine in Florida, and SpaceX was soon dropping the new schedule suggesting Sunday the 22nd. However, that has been pulled too, so if you take a look right now, perhaps we have a new target date. Fingers crossed we'll see them up and away shortly. Now, Rocket Lab were also supposed to send their Symphony in the Stars mission from New Zealand late Friday. This is going to be the first of 2 dedicated Electron missions for a commercial customer that is sadly mostly confidential. That was pushed a little too due to weather, so keep an eye out for that one launching. With 20 plus missions planned for 2025, they're running at a pace that really shows that they're becoming a go-to workhorse for dedicated access to orbit for satellites of this smaller scale. It's actually pretty amazing. Every launch this year and last year has been fully successful in a game that is never easy. It's also the stuff behind the scenes that amazes me even more. Rocket launch is really just one part, which could be overshadowed eventually by the huge investment and success of their hardware and software for space operation. Their post the other day was highlighting that they've got more than 60 satellites currently in orbit running Rocket Lab's Frontier radios. Not just communication systems though, they've got full satellite buses, reaction wheels, solar panel systems, star trackers, and all the software that goes with it. Looking at the site, you can see that they're offering entire spacecraft solutions end to end. It's kind of crazy to think that just a few years ago they were considered a startup simply trying to get to orbit. Now finally, some surprise action from Honda R&D. Early in the week, they conducted a launch and landing test of this experimental reusable rocket, all developed independently by Honda. We had no idea that this thing even existed. It's a small test vehicle about 20 feet tall or 6.3 meters, and the entire thing, fully fueled, is about 1.3 tons. So yeah, this is so cool. They flew this up to around 270 metres or close to 900 feet from the surface. I couldn't find any mention of the propellant that they're using, but given the venting, it looked cryogenic. Based on the plume there, it looks like it's probably liquid methane and oxygen. This was their first launch and landing attempt, of course, all aiming to demonstrate rocket reusability. You can see there it had beautiful stability both in the ascent and descent, but could they stick the landing? Yes, indeed, very nicely done there, using 4 landing legs for the touchdown. The landing was apparently within 37 centimetres of the touchdown point, just a little over 1 foot, which is pretty darn impressive. Although Honda have made no clear official decisions about the commercialisation of such a vehicle, they're showing that they have some pretty awesome expertise here already. So that is it for the week, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, that subscribe button will not press itself. Thanks for being here. If you want to continue the ride, I think you will very much enjoy this video here next, or perhaps these ones over here. Thanks as always for watching all the way to the end. That helps us out a lot. We've got a big week coming, so lots in store for the next video.